Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. We're going across all social media, X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. We try to bring you these great conversations. We also have some great interviews that you could see on all those social media sites that Joe and I do that go on the radio twice a week at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Anyway, let's jump right in. Remember that we go live normally on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock. Okay, this week we're going Friday night because, quite frankly, I had to back out last night. But we are here tonight. Now, we got a couple things we want to talk about. All right, we want to talk about, number one, whether or not people really are going for carbon taxes. Joe's going to break that down more than I, okay? But we have to talk about that because even though right now it's happening in Canada, not only has it been happening in Canada, an increase is coming in Canada, but in America, well, we got a clip for you that we're going to play that shows that, maybe it's coming soon to America. And then we're going to have to talk about some of this transgender ideology. Got a couple of clips to play for you there. Anyway, so we have right now 2/3 of Canadians oppose an April 1st. Joe Resinello, am I right? April 1st carbon tax increase?
Correct.
April 1st carbon tax increase. Let's play a couple of clips for you guys, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it.
Listen, right now, everyone is stressed out with the cost of living. It is a stressful time. There are massive challenges around the world in terms of inflation, in terms of supply chains. There are wars going on in a way that is putting more pressure on people and emotional angst on a whole bunch of people in every community. There is uncertainties. We're still, in some ways, recovering from the effects of the acute pandemic that we just had. We're dealing with, countries getting more protectionistic in a whole bunch of different ways. There are real challenges in the world right now. And one of the challenges everybody is seeing is climate change.
Joe, he just said that clip goes on for about 6 minutes. There's more there to unpack than you really need to. Let's start with protectionist. Who's he talking about, Joe? Who's he talking about? He's talking about MAGA. That's what he's see, he's the Canadian Prime Minister, but when he starts talking like that, he's talking about MAGA. He's talking about people who actually give a damn about how much money they take home in their paycheck and giving less to the government. That's number one. Number two, he continues to push the propaganda about by the way, it's now an acute. I haven't heard that before. It's an acute pandemic. Okay. Well, that was back in 2020, Justin. All right. But remember, Joe, what we're all suffering from, Joe Resinello? We're all suffering from the effects of climate change. Joe, I got to throw it over to you because if I talk more about Trudeau, I'm going to make myself very, very sick.
Oh, Lord. Let's break it down by the numbers. April 1st, April Fool's Day, Canada, you're getting an increase in taxes. Okay. Ledger poll commissioned by the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, just so you know where we're getting our numbers. 69% of Canada oppose this. Let's just talk about that for a minute. That means you're dead in the water. 2 out of every 3 voters are not for it.
If you respect democracy.
Correct. But he doesn't care.
No.
Why? Because in this particular state, the press is going to feed the people a bunch of lies because the press and the government are in bed with one another. Right. And you don't need a politician to do anything more than to lie, which he was just doing, project, and frankly, divide the people. And that's how he keeps getting away with it. Now we'll put it into the American position. Our politicians do exactly the same thing. Now let's add on this. We legalized a voting model which gives them an advantage. What's that advantage? We just put in to America 7 million people, most of which are in cities. We don't ask for ID. We allow them to vote by mail. And we allow ballot harvesting, all of which is legal, which means I can go to an area of a city where these people live. I could have them vote, fill out their mail-in ballots, and then I drop them in the drop box, all of which is legal.
Right.
So that is how the politicians get around this. They're not catering to the people because they don't have to. They're catering to the globalists because this is a globalist idea. Climate change is being spoon-fed, and Trudeau is nothing more than a puppet. You also have the
He
corporations.
really is, by the way. I got to cut you off, Joe. Trudeau, nothing he just said is actually an original thought in his head. It's a script. It's written in Hollywood, Joe, and it's given to him.
I agree.
I'll admit that Justin Trudeau's a good-looking guy, okay? So you got a good-looking guy. He's young, right? Speaks well, reads his lines well. Same thing with
Lies
AOC.
well.
Lies well. Same thing with AOC. See, she's young, she's attractive, right? She reads her lines well, she lies well, and that's who they always want to put up there because who, Joe? Come on, you're an insensitive ogre. You're just an ape Italian from New Jersey. If you really think that Justin Trudeau would be a liar or AOC would be a liar, they lie through their teeth. They lie with every breath that they can muster. Joe, go ahead, babe.
It's now that's how they get away with it. Now let's break this down by the numbers. This is the second, if not the third, carbon tax increase. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I know it's at least the second. It could very well be the third. What else do you have that's going against the people of Canada? You have inflation. Why? He mentioned it. Supply chain. Why? Because you're going away from oil and gas. They're taxing you and making it impossible for you to drive, to heat your house. Also, they printed money which they did not have, which also exacerbates inflation. Now, let's talk about how this is going to affect you come April 1st. 17-cent increase per liter of gasoline, 21-cent increase per liter of diesel, and 15-cent increase per cubic meter of natural gas.
So now that hits the rich people, right?
Absolutely not. And that's why he's talking. That's why I was laughing as he was talking, because ultimately Justin Trudeau's worth like $80 million. Couple cents here and there, 25 cents.
Did you catch that? He said, like, there's a lot of things we're all going through. You're not going through anything, Justin Trudeau. You're still gonna eat foie gras and drink Grey
100%,
Goose
Joe.
and have caviar. This affects you in no way, shape, or form.
And that's what the message, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because that's the message average people have to get through their head. You can't afford. You see, this is where, again, don't get me wrong. I have my views. I view things as a Catholic, just so you know. As a Catholic, that's my views. But here's the deal. The discussions don't matter anymore because ultimately you don't matter anymore, and the politicians know that. Justin Trudeau knows that. All he has to do is lie. But too many people, frankly, as the old Bob Dylan song says, you're going to serve somebody, and if you don't serve God, frankly, you're going to serve somebody else. And many people look to the climate. The climate is their God. And that is why, in their mind, Joe, they think they're doing something good. But in the interim, they are going to be broke. Joe, regular people, and I'm not saying this as a Republican, a conservative, I'm saying this as a human who basically has children, and you want to feed your kids, you want to pay your bills. If you're a regular person, you cannot afford to support those who support a green energy model, Joe. You can't.
Joe, I know that I sound callous when I apologize, Joe. I'm a little bit sick. That's why we didn't go on yesterday. But I'm going to brave through it because this is an important conversation to have. But, Joe, that's why I sound a little callous. But my view is this. When those regular people, just like guys like us, we're just regular people. If they come complaining to me, my response is going to be, go on and cry in your coffee, but don't come bitching to me. I'm going to say that, Joe.
Joe, but the thing is, we're in that boat too. You see,
but at least we're saying something about it.
No.
They want to go and support people like
I
Justin
know
Trudeau.
that, but like we're going to get flushed down. You see, ultimately, what this is going to do, and this is economic violence. It's what companies do. Companies control their people, corporations, through economic violence. They don't have to raise a hand. They threaten you.
Right.
economically. And that's what controls you. Well, that's what this is. They're pushing you away from oil and gas because you can't afford it. They're going to do the same thing with meat.
Yeah, but
It's gonna be
you can't even afford electric.
but
You
my
know, there's no-
that and well, that is because they don't care about people. And that's, if you ask me, the message is we're all in the same boat. The boat is sinking. You see, whether it's like in scripture, the rain falls on the good and the bad. Well, guess what? The boat goes down, call yourself a conservative, call yourself a liberal, you're sinking. You're in the boat. You see, Justin Trudeau isn't in the boat because he's really rich. The people who run the networks, the news, the companies, Hollywood, they're really rich. They are going to be fine. You're not. And I'm not. It's going to affect our children. It's going to affect our way of life.
But
The
then
middle
why-
class is going to disappear.
But Joe, I understand that, but and again, this is what gets us taken down on YouTube or Facebook. But then we've said the same thing before. Here, let me give you a quote. Now, this is a quote, Joe, from an Italian. There's a shock, okay? Franco Terrazzano. All right,
Nice.
I love that name, by the way. Franco Terrazzano. He's the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So basically, he's on the side of the taxpayers. He says, quote, the poll proves, the Ledger poll that you alluded to, the poll proves that the vast majority of Canadians don't support and can't afford another carbon tax hike. Now, he goes on, if Trudeau and his MPs care about making life more affordable for Canadians, as you said, Joe, they don't, then the least they could do is not hike their carbon tax. Now, Franco, with all due respect, what they should do is they should repeal the carbon tax. That might be a little bit too much. Yes, Joe, it's the same old story. It leads me to the conclusion that they know, people like Trudeau know that, yeah, Poilievre might be looking good in the polls, but when Trudeau goes out and speaks like this, it leads me to believe he knows that the game might be a little bit askew, if you know what I'm talking about. Because I've said this before, Joe, going back to 2018 when we started this show. If they really let the people, whether it's Canada or America, it doesn't matter. If they let the people know exactly what they're thinking, exactly what their proposals are, exactly what their positions are, they wouldn't get elected, dog catcher.
Joe, you're right. And give the example of what happened in Florida on the DeSantis, the first time versus second, please.
DeSantis turned around. My whole life, Joe, in your whole life, that's all we heard is South Florida's Democrat, South Florida's blue, Broward County's blue, Miami-Dade is blue. DeSantis put in some reasonable, sensible election reform in Florida, and you know what Broward and Miami-Dade did in the last election? We found out they're red. We found out that those counties are red, and therefore Florida is not a purple state. It is a deep red state. Joe, they don't have a shot at winning Florida anymore. And that's what's got to happen nationwide. Justin Trudeau wouldn't stand a chance if it wasn't for Ontario, okay? Really what it comes down to. Just like America is controlled, much of our politics is controlled by L.A., or let's just say Southern California, Cook County, Illinois, North Jersey, and New York County, Kings County, Queens County, New York County. They control our politics. But let me tell you something, even in those places, Joe, if dead people would stop voting, okay, then I think maybe we would see a little bit of a difference. I cannot believe that normal people, and then not everybody's normal. You know, some people would say we're not normal. However,
I'm glad you said that.
but normal people listen to this stuff, listen to this drivel from Trudeau and people like him. And I'm going to play a clip from this other guy who you probably know. I don't want to know. Normal people say, I'm not for this. And you know what? They proved this. They proved this back in 2020 in New Jersey. Let me tell you something. What was his name? The guy who ran for governor against Murphy, the Italian guy. Jack. I forgot his name.
You met him at the Mount Carmel.
I met him at the summer fair in Lyndhurst. Jack Ciccarelli. Was it Ciccarelli or something like that?
I think that's right. It starts with a C.
Okay. You want to know what, Joe? He won that election. He won that election. He refused, as an establishment republic, to challenge it. Establishment Republican to challenge it. He won that election because underneath it all, we saw some smaller races go the other way against the narrative. And it leads me to believe that if things were on the up and up, if we did what DeSantis did in Florida, show ID, some reasonable measures, guess what, Joe? They lose, and they lose bigly, to
Let's
borrow a
let,
word from
let's
Donald
break
Trump.
down these numbers a little further so people know. The 70%, it's 69%. Basically, 63% who are against this, okay, are urban folks, people who live in urban areas. Of the 31%, it's people between the age of 18 to 34, most of which don't have kids.
Right.
And frankly, those are they, if you ask me, I don't want to say they don't count, but they do because they vote. But at the end of the day, anyone who has sense, and it's not even along political lines. When you're talking about 70% of the nation, that is overwhelming.
Joe, let me paint a picture for you in America. And then I want to play this other clip because I think it would be, if nothing else, entertaining to our audience here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please share this video, Joe. Let me paint a picture for you. In New York City, a 20-something-year-old, a 30-something-year-old. In New York City, where you spend most of your time, if you live in New York City, you don't need to own a car. Okay. And a lot of the things that people need oil and gas for, okay, they don't have to use primarily gas in your car. That's where it really hits you if you're a working class person. Joe, if you're a single 20-something-year-old, 30-something-year-old in New York City, this stuff doesn't affect you either. It doesn't affect you. They're going to go ahead and they're going to vote for the Justin Trudeaus or all the environmentalist wackos. If you live in New York, if you live in Chicago, if you live in LA, you don't even own a car anyway. So what do you pay? You pay in LA, you don't even have to pay a gas bill because you're not really using heat in your home. You're not in Los Angeles. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Well, you also have disposable income because you don't have kids. So if you're making, you're a big earner, you live in a city, you're young, it doesn't phase you. You don't have tuition bills, you don't have clothes bills for your kids. All you got to do is worry about you and your drinks. And that's who's supporting this. And it's not even a big percentage of it. But again, I don't think it matters because, as Rusty Reno said, we're in a post-democratic era. And that's sad. And that's why we have to take our country back. Power is never given. It's taken.
Remember what Gordon Gekko said. Remember what Gordon Gekko said to Bud Fox when in the movie Wall Street, when Michael Douglas looks at Charlie Sheen and says, "Well, you're not naive enough to think we're living in a democracy, do you, Bud?" Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Joe, I got to play this guy. You probably know who he is, but he makes me sick. So I'm going to play the clip.
The Biden administration, our largest trading partner, doesn't have a carbon tax and is pursuing their climate goals. Why are you so convinced that Canada needs one when some of our biggest allies don't have one?
Do you know, I've had the pleasure to go to Washington, D.C. A number of occasions since I've been nominated environment minister, and I've had U.S. senators tell me how much they envy the fact that we can do carbon pricing in Canada. Now, I don't know how many times in your life you've spoken to a U.S. senator, but it's been my experience that they don't tend to envy Canadians on many things, or at least not talk about it very publicly. But on carbon pricing, they would like to, many U.S. legislator would like to be able to do carbon pricing because it's the cheapest way of reducing emissions, or certainly one of the cheapest way. And yes, the Biden administration is pursuing an aggressive policy to fight climate change, but it's a very expensive one because they can't do carbon pricing. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Now, you caught the merci beaucoup at the end, okay? A couple things, I'm going to throw it over to you. Number one, you see how he didn't call it carbon tax. He called it carbon pricing, okay? You caught that, right? So, like, again, it's all that, it's that Orwellian, that newspeak. I'm not going to use your words, Mr. Reporter, and call it what it is, which is a carbon tax, okay? I'm going to call it carbon pricing. The other thing is the Biden administration found out it's too expensive. We Canadians found out it's cheaper to impose a carbon tax. Cheaper for who? For the government? But it ain't cheaper for the middle class person who's trying to heat their home or put gas in their car.
See, Joe,
that is the epitome. Joe, I'm gonna throw it right over to you.
You're
that
right.
Guy is the epitome of an elitist.
Absolutely. And that's what people have to get through their head. They don't represent you. They don't represent you. And you know something? He's telling the truth. I bet you senators have said that. Why? Because they're elitist too. Why? Because they're rich. You can't afford to support globalists. And the globalists are the true enemy of the people.
Yeah.
They will eliminate the middle class. They've already done it in Canada. You can't buy a home. I covered Canada for so long. At one point, 1 in 5 people in Toronto were going to a food bank. Buying a home is out of reach of a regular person. This is what is happening real time. Americans should be paying attention to what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Australia, what's happening in the EU. They're much further along. This is not for regular people. We just spoke. You should listen to our interview. Rusty Reno, he wrote a great article, Engines of Destruction. It's in the January edition of First Things. Read it. He breaks down from Boston Consulting Group, which is a premier consulting group similar to McKinsey, the best and the brightest. Talked about the numbers, what it will cost to transition to a green economy in America. It's trillions of dollars that will tax the middle class out of existence. Out of existence.
But isn't ultimately that the goal?
It
Everybody
is
in
the
the-
goal. Yeah,
everybody
Joe,
in the chat room knows that.
Bingo. And people, yes, because poor people are easily controlled. You can control people. Why are they buying all the land? Because I control your food. I control how you eat. Bill Gates, the CEO from what's it called? That Chinese CEO. He looks like a mutant. Friggin-
I'm not sure, but go ahead.
no, what the hell? Alibaba, the CEO.
Oh.
You ever see him? He looks like the Great Gazoo. He's scary.
He looks like the great
Dude, but
Gazoo.
I'm just saying, they control. Poor people are easily controlled. And that is the game. And this is the sick part. Wait till the digital currency comes because it's coming. And when it does, you're trapped. We're trapped. That's when the long winter begins. Similar to what happened in the 20th century to Germany, 80 years. Similar to what happened in Russia, 40, 50 years. Similar to what happened in Poland until our Moses comes. And I got news for you. Trump isn't it. We're just beginning this journey. And in it, if you ask me, I'm going to get a little biblical. This is what God is going to use to purify the people. He did it with the Israelites in Babylon. He did it with the Egyptians. And that is what's going to happen in the interim. It's going to get our head straight.
Well, let me ask you something. Let me ask you, and let's keep it there for 1 second. Joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. If you please, if you're watching this video, if you like what you're seeing, if you like what you're hearing, share it, please. Joe, you think maybe America, you think Western countries just in general, especially America, you think we might deserve a little bit of divine ass whooping?
Funny what you say. My wife says that. Do we actually deserve to not go through this? We
No.
kill children in the 3rd trimester. For 50 years, we have slaughtered children. Slaughtered them. Now, not only do we slaughter them, we kill them in the 3rd trimester. We now lop off the breasts of 15-year-old girls.
Even younger.
We convince young kids who, frankly, in many cases, come from bad situations, are confused, are hurt, and are wounded, that they could transition into other genders, that living radical sexual lifestyles is a healthy way to live. When you look at the life expectancy of many of these people, if you look at the numbers around alcoholism, suicide, drug abuse, all of which point to a direction of destruction for these kids, yet we encourage them. Do we deserve anything else? In all honesty, but and here's the thing, you could give them all the facts in the world. You could speak honestly. You could speak in common sense terms. No one wants to hear it. They have to feel it. And that's what we're going to get. And Joe, it's not going to be for a year. It could be for decades. I call it the long winter. And I got news for you. In my opinion, this is my $2 opinion. They're not allowing Trump to be the president. It's not going to happen. Even if he is elected between November and January, and I'm going to say this from now until then, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. something's going to happen and they'll invalidate the election. Just like what they similarly did to Brazil. 1 million people went into the street. Of course, our press didn't cover it. That, if you looked on Twitter, I was looking at it. 1 million people. They stole that election in Brazil.
Right.
They stole it. And they're not going to allow Trump to be the president. It's not, and it's going to be.
And
in
even if
plain
they
sight.
did, you want to know what? He had 4 years to do. The only thing you can say he got us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is involved with all this climate nonsense and carbon taxes and everything. The Paris Accord. Of course, that was the end of the world. In the meantime, 8 years later, we're all still here. He pulled us out of the Paris Accord. But at the end of the day, somebody said it in the chat room. We need a national awakening. We need a national
100%, Joe.
awakening.
I agree. You're 100%.
Not woke, awakened.
100%.
There's a big difference.
Well, that's what, Joe, I'm praying the novena every night. I started at the 12th for Cardinal Burke. I mean, that's what that's about. Waking up millions of people. Our Lady Guadalupe. That is, I'll be truthful with you. That I'm praying it. I'm praying it from now until December 12th.
Ultimately, they look. They have the power right now because they control the media, they control the message, they control state elections. They have the power right now. If people, and Joe, we're not even talking about everybody, okay? But if a good amount of people just had their consciousness raised a little bit, if they were awakened a little bit as to what's going on, or maybe brought to the point where they give a crap, which alludes to your idea of maybe we're in for a punishment so that people do wake up, then you know what? The elitists and their power will be taken away. They know that, Joe, sometimes it's a matter of sheer numbers. There's more of us than there are of them. But people are asleep, or they're lulled, or they're tempted, or they're placated. There's so many different ways of controlling people. But guess what? I'm not under anybody's control, nor are you. But I want to play you a clip from somebody because I want to pivot to another oligarchic position, okay, if I may, when it comes to transgenderism, all right? Because, Joe, something tells me that that's, no matter how much that's being sold as a winning political issue, it's really not. Now, this video got a little chopped, but I want you to watch it. I want you all out there to watch it. This is a black guy, a black father. Listen to this.
Taking the wheel. I have an 8-year-old daughter who is absolutely dynamic, who can do anything. Athletically, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally, she is a dynamo. And I don't want a man swimming against her in the pool. The fact is, I don't want her playing against boys in soccer. I don't even let my sons rough her up. Do you think I'm going to let your son rough her up? This is what we're talking about. Policy going back to the parents. Because if you think people who love America are willing to fight for it, you haven't met parents yet. Taking the wheel.
I love it, Joe. That guy is a threat to the establishment. Number one, he's black. So he goes against the narrative that somehow to talk the way we do means that we're white supremacists or some nonsense that MSNBC tries to sell to people out there and CNN. He's a black guy who talks just like us. We talk just like him. He says, I don't want my 8-year-old daughter swimming against a boy or playing soccer against a boy. And then he talks about giving power back to parents. I wonder if Merrick Garland put him on the terrorist watch list. Joe, I'm throwing it over to you.
We have to find issues and things that unite people to get the country back, and that's one of them. Parents. Parents could bring in Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists. I've even heard gays say that they're against what he just talked about. There's a what's it called? Gays against trans.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
So my point is, we have to find issues that are apolitical to get the country back. Then we could talk about other things when the conversations mean something. This is a good one because it brings people together. And what's another one? And I harp on it constantly. I'll tell you my secret. Money. Money unites people. Being poor, not having enough money to feed your kids, never mind buy a nice car, to heat your house.
Right.
See, this is unifying. We have to unify And then we take the country back, and then the Congress and the Senate means something again. We could have debate. We could have real elections that aren't involving, frankly, people who don't have Social Security numbers, i.e., people who came across the border. And that's why they did come across the border.
Right.
It was a political tool. You don't need a wall. Stop allowing them in to vote, and it stops.
Right.
And this is what we need to do. And we have to, as people, see that this, and I got news for you, all of it. There's people like Joe, all of these other debates, I'm telling you, they're distractions. They're real. Like, I don't believe in abortion. I could talk to someone who does believe in it. That's a real discussion. But is it going to get resolved? No.
No.
Is the immigration thing going to get resolved? No. The senators are all, frankly, in the bag. And the ones that do care get shouted down. From
Right.
Bernie Sanders to the left to friggin' what's it called? The guy, Josh Hawley in Missouri. They don't count. They're an anomaly. The country needs to be returned. Because as of now, Joe, I'm telling you, we don't have power anymore. And then we could talk about, frankly, people, democracy does. I listened to an interview, Tucker Carlson recently. He interviewed a woman who lived under the Chinese Revolution. And she said, and she's older, she said, the people in America have changed. They have. We don't believe in God anymore. We have no North Star. And the democracy doesn't work when people don't have a North Star. We're clinging to tribalism. We're clinging to climate cult.
I was going to say climate cult.
And frankly,
And you could call it trans cult too, because there's a
There you
whole
go.
cult around that. Did you watch Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? Did you see that?
I did not. I did not.
Okay, I watched it a couple of months ago now, but I watched it. All right, I was genuinely curious. Joe, any normal person, I don't even care if you're a liberal, okay? Any normal person who watches the people that Matt Walsh actually interviewed in that movie has to look at those people and say to themselves, this person actually believes that. Like when he asked the one woman, he says, who was one of the more pleasant ones. When Matt Walsh says to her, what is a woman? She goes, well, that is the question. Excuse me? And then when Matt Walsh kept using the word truth with the one guy who was a professor, he goes, you're using the word truth. I feel like that's like a dangerous word. I feel intimidated. I'm paraphrasing. It's like, Joe, my point is, these people sound like they would call us religious zealots because we believe in Jesus Christ. Okay. Or we're cultish in that way. I don't think these people even know what they're saying. Like,
Well, they're unmoored, Joe. I mean, I'll be honest. I'll give you a perfect example. I was on a conference call at work, and I made a joke, because I have 5 kids, and I said, "Oh, I'm a crazy Catholic." Dude, there was like an awkward silence, almost like I said, like, I'm a Nazi. like there was an awkward silence to say, yeah, I'm Catholic, as if like that's like a shocking thing,
right.
or you to live through your faith. This is where we're at.
Or
Even
shocking to even say it. Shocking to even say it.
And that lack of North Star, that's why the democracy doesn't, that's another reason why the democracy doesn't work. Another reason why the press is supposed to keep the government in check. They're in the bag for the government. Another reason why the democracy doesn't work. Our school system is basically brainwashing the best and the brightest, who then become the leaders of everything. They're all twisted. They're twisted.
You know how you always say that we shouldn't look for a political solution? I'm going to give you a little bit of I'm going to expand on that for a second, because I agree with you 1,000% that what this country needs more than anything else is an awakening. Perhaps a divine ass kicking is really what we need. But you know what that will do, though? When people are awakened, Joe, that will lead to a more vibrant democracy. Voting will actually mean something if
100%.
the people you're electing, even on the primary level, don't nominate the guy who's the country club Republican when the guy who's the plumber in your area wants to run for Congress and he talks just like we do and just like you do. Why do you vote for the guy who's wearing the white shoes and has the cleft chin and talks like this and speaks to the camera? Why don't you vote for the plumber? The plumber's more attuned to what you got going on than that guy is. And then maybe we could get our democracy right once we get the moral questions right, and dare I say, get God right.
Joe, you're 100%. And you're 100% right. And that's why a lot of people would say no to that. But I think the results of these policies speak for themselves. Our country is falling apart. Our society is falling apart. Just go to any city in America, from east to west. It's falling. It's not working.
Well,
It doesn't
at one
work.
point, at one point, Joe, when you see it's not working, I mean, what did C.S. Lewis say? If you're walking, the two people walking down the wrong path, the one who stops, turns around, and goes back to where he started, that person is the most progressive. Let me show you this clip.
Let's just bring you a bit of breaking news, which may be of interest to some of you. It's about puberty blockers. Now, these are drugs that are used to delay the changes of puberty in transgender youngsters. In terms of how they are prescribed by the NHS, there has been a lot of controversy over the last few years about this. At the moment, they are only prescribed to children attending gender identity services as part of clinical research, and they are not routinely offered to children at gender identity clinics, but they are still offered. Well, the government, NHS England, has just confirmed that children will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. This is coming from NHS England. It just broke in the last few moments.
Now, real quick, I want you to get into the meat and potatoes of that, Joe. But now this is what I mean about they think that we're not listening. They think that we're stupid and we don't actually listen. Did you hear how she started that? You heard, everybody out there heard the clip. All right. She says, this might be of interest to some of you out there. No, lady. That's in the interest of all of us. That is a societal matter, giving puberty blockers to kids. It's not of interest to some people. All people care about that. Just like that black father that we showed. He doesn't want his boy coming home saying, hey, daddy, I feel like a girl today. Something tells me that guy would give his son a backhand and say, you're a boy, now go to your room. My point is, did you hear how she started it? This might be of interest to some of you. It's a societal issue and the press still doesn't get it or doesn't want you to get it.
I saw a good interview. There's a gentleman coming out of Houston. He's a doctor, and he talked about how he was a whistleblower in a Houston hospital. He was a surgeon blowing the whistle on doctors that were prescribing medication and or operating on kids to change their genders. And his whistleblowing activities resulted in legislation. Both parties, Republican and Democrat, or again, that proves this is a unifying issue. Both parties, and the hospital was still doing the procedures. So he again goes to the press. What does that say? And he said that, well, what does it say? That the people's voice mean nothing. That's the first thing what it says. Because it was Democrats and Republicans that voted for this legislation. But also, he said something interesting. He was being, if you ask me, honest, but he was also being, if you ask me, intuitive. He said a lot of these doctors, now these are doctors, surgeons, they're smart people. They believe in their heart that they are helping these kids.
Right.
They're not doing this because if you're not of that mindset, you're insane. Or you're frankly like Joseph Mengele in like Dachau.
Mm-hmm.
They believe they're helping the kids. That goes back to the conversation of they're unmoored. You see, you don't have to be a doctor to know that that's wrong.
Right.
But when you're not moored to a North Star, i.e. God, I believe him to be Jesus Christ. I believe he is God as a Catholic. But there are other beliefs out there. And in a society where it's pluralistic, people have all types of beliefs. Say you have a belief, I don't know, whatever, like even a storefront church, that's wrong. If you're a Jehovah Witness, that's wrong. If you're a Mormon, that's wrong.
Well, that's why the Catholic Church teaches about about the natural law. It's what we all know to be right and what we all know to be wrong.
But that's why
They
that
know this is
doctor
wrong.
is off. And that's like at a fundamental level, a man or a woman who highly intelligent, who they're not moored to something that should tell them immediately that this is wrong. This is bad. You're not helping this kid. You're hurting them. It's frankly abuse, and history is going to prove me right. But yet, in their head, I'm doing right. People
Right.
who had slaves felt that they were, I'm
They,
kind.
they
to
were
them.
convinced they were
I'm
convinced it was
kind to
moral
my
to
slaves. I'm kind to them, Joe. I feed them. I take care of them. No, you own a person. You
Right.
own a person. And this is what I'm saying. You're unmoored.
Right.
And that's why democracy doesn't work with a society like that. I'm not saying everyone has to be, I'd like them to be Catholic. I'd like everyone to go to Mass every day. But you don't have to know basic things, which I'm just saying, to have society, the golden rule, to treat people like you want to be treated.
Well, Joe, let's break that down for a second, all right? Because we don't have a lot of time. We're listening to the front line with Joe and Joe. Let's break that down for a second, okay? You say we live in a pluralistic society, but we have to agree on certain things. Here, I'm going to throw it out there, okay? We need to agree that life starts at the moment of conception. That's a biological fact. It's not a statement of religion, statement of science. Biological fact. Life, human life, everybody's human life began when the sperm and the egg came together, and the egg was fertilized, and that's a human being, okay? We have to agree on that. We have to agree that marriage is between one man and one woman. We have to agree on that, okay? We have to agree that here's one that's going to go over like a lead balloon, that the contraceptive mentality in our culture has to go. Okay, we have to agree on that. We have to agree that pornography has no intrinsic value whatsoever. Not only doesn't it have any value, it has a negative effect on society. See, Joe, these are things that even in a pluralistic society, there's a lot of people who call themselves conservative too, are not going to come together on.
Well,
That's the
I
problem.
agree, but Joe, 100%. I agree with everything you just said. But in order, you see, conservative doesn't mean you're going to agree with that for one reason. You have to have an encounter with the living God. That's the game changer. 70% of Catholics don't even believe the Eucharist, in the Eucharist. 70% of Catholics. So how are you going to believe in that? You see, that's a larger problem. Like I agree with everything you just said, but it's a big ask for a secular society to believe in that, because a secular people want instant gratification now. And those things don't prescribe to that. And that's another problem. I mean, as far as how to get that and instill that into a family, into a society. But in the interim, basic things have to unify us if we want to even have a real conversation, say, about marriage. Because right now, Joe, the deck is stacked. The deck is stacked. They made a voting model that is in their favor. They made it legal. People now, it's the new norm. 70%, I heard a number of America votes through the mail. This is a highly suspect
Unacceptable.
model. It
Unacceptable.
shouldn't be. You don't have to show ID. They opened the border. They have the model. We have to this is what I mean. Like all the other issues, if you ask me, before we even have a real conversation on that, we got to get the country back. We have to get or we're in for a long and dark winter. What we just talked about in Canada, Joe, it's going to affect everyone. There will be no middle class. Joe, there will be no middle class. By the time you're 60, you won't have a tooth in your friggin' head. That's everybody.
Yeah.
Only the small percentage of the wealthy will. The rest of us, Frankly, we won't be able to drive a car because they'll tax it out of our income bracket. You will not be able to afford meat because
And
it
they'll
will
force you into a 15-minute city.
because poor people are easily controlled. And that's the direction it's going.
And you want to know
people
what the
have to
average
see it.
you don't want to know what the average 20 or 30-year-old would say if you say you're forced into a 15-minute city? Their first question in America would be, "Are there chicks there?"
Well, that's another problem and frankly, a lot of those kids don't see hope, and and in all honesty, they don't have hope. They can't get jobs. They can't make a living. The men are unmarriable because they can't make money. They can't start a family. Joe, it's all falling in on itself.
Yeah.
And you see, like the average man in some of these states, you can't earn a living. You can't earn a damn living. How are you going to have kids?
I
How are
know.
you going to have like? Let's be real.
And that's and again, and anybody who knows anything about the last 20 years know that this is the goal of the oligarchs. You wreck the middle class. You prevent people from having more children. I mean, and Joe, this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, that's why the French revolutionaries, they called it the bourgeoisie. That's why they went after them. That's why they went after the church. People forget that 40,000 priests and nuns were killed during the French Revolution. 40,000.
Joe, 1 in 10 people in Russia were thrown in gulags. That went on for 40 years.
Yeah.
1 to 4 or 5 Poles.
And that's what happens, and that's what'll happen to you, and that's what'll happen to me.
That's right.
I mean, they have enough control as it is.
But
Imagine
that's
if
where
they had
people,
total
if
control.
you ask me, that's where, again, you saw this in Michigan, you saw this in Canada over the LGBT agenda being taught in schools. People standing shoulder to shoulder, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, an atheist, because they don't want their kids taught X, Y, and Z. We have to, if you ask me, view this as self-preservation. We have to get the country back because I got news for you. Wherever you live, conservative state, liberal state, you're rich, you're poor, you're educated, you're a blue collar worker, you're a white collar worker, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're in the boat and the boat is sinking. Unless you're very wealthy, you're sinking. You will have no power. None. We barely have any now. You will have no power. And you have to see that. Because if you don't, it's going to be too late. And like I said, it'll be decades, Joe. It's not going to be an election cycle. This is history speaking. This has happened already in countries. It'll be decades.
Well, let's hope we get a serious counter revolution. And we start with, people start pushing back, whether it's in Canada, whether it's Trudeau, whether it's here against, the the Biden administration or the puppet masters that are controlling everything. No matter who it is, Joe, at least right now, we still have the opportunity to fight back. And the way we're doing it right now, as much as they want to kill Elon Musk, okay, we could go on X. YouTube hasn't taken us down yet. Zuckerberg hasn't taken us down yet. Rumble is more independent. Let's just keep talking this way like many others out there. And let's do our part, Joe Resinello, to hopefully awaken people's consciousness. We got to leave it there, Joe Resinello. Any final thoughts, Joe?
No, I thought this was a very good conversation. I think, to be honest with you, these are topics that, if you ask me, affect everybody, the common man. This is what this is about. It's about common people who frankly want to live, that pay their bills, that love their kids. That's most people. We are you. And frankly, at the end of the day, if we go down, you go down. And no one wants to go down. So we got to open our eyes. We open our eyes, we take our country back, and then we could have our debates. We could have elections. Let the better idea win. That's a democracy. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Right? I mean, that's what it's about. Let the better person win. Let the better idea win, fair and square. Right now, it's not fair and square. I don't know what else to say.
There's nothing else to say. Joe Resinello, as always, a pleasure. Thank you all out there for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Please share this video. We're on Rumble. We're on X. We are on YouTube, Facebook. So wherever you see it, hey, if you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, share. Help us out a little bit. Remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.